During the family portrait session, I realized something horrifying. The painting wasn't just capturing their faces, it was revealing their true selves. Stick with me until the very last moment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the truth, like the paint on a canvas, can't be erased. And if you're not careful, it might just reveal more than you ever expected. You're going to think I'm cruel by the end of this, maybe even heartless. But before you judge me, just remember this. Everything I did was for love. Real love. The kind that doesn't smile for photos or show up when there's something to gain, but the quiet kind, the stubborn kind, the kind that stays even when everyone else walks away. Now, if you're still with me, pour a cup of tea. You're going to want to sit for this. It started on a Thursday. The air was heavy with that late summer stillness, when the wind forgets to move and the light clings to everything like it's afraid to let go. I was arranging brushes in my studio when I heard the tires crunch across the gravel outside. My son's car. I didn't need to look. I recognized the sound. Smooth, expensive, impatient. A moment later, I heard her voice. Julia. God, it smells like turpentine already. Not a greeting, not even a hello. She came in like she owned the place. High heels clicking across hardwood like gunshots. She glanced at the portraits on the walls, my walls, with that same tight smile she saves for waiters and charity events. David followed her in. My son. His shoulders hunched like a man who's been apologizing for decades. Mother, he said, kissing my cheek like it was something he'd scheduled. You look... well. That was generous. I hadn't been sleeping well. Harold's voice had been in my head more than usual. Not the words, just the tone. That steady calm he had, even when he knew something was wrong. I poured the tea. The good china. I always use it when I expect to be disappointed. Julia didn't bother sitting before she started. We've been thinking. About the house. I didn't look up. I knew what was coming. David cleared his throat. It's a lot for one person. Maintenance, safety. Maybe it's time to think about the next step. There it was. Not concern, not love, just strategy. She didn't even pretend. We've had an offer already, a developer. They want to turn it into an event space. You wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. Just like that, sell the house, my home, my memories, my studio, everything Harold and I built together. For their benefit. I let the silence hang, let it drip between them like slow sour honey. Then I said, all right. Julia's smile flickered. Really? But, I said, on one condition. They looked at each other. I want one last family portrait, I told them. Here, in the studio, everyone together, and I paint it myself. Julia scoffed. That could take weeks. Then I suggest you clear your schedule. David hesitated. Why is this so important to you? I met his eyes for the first time in years, because some things deserve to be remembered properly. He nodded, eventually, and I smiled, because that was all I needed. What they didn't know was that the moment they agreed, they stepped into Harold's last design, his final clause, hidden in the will, a condition no one knew about, except me. The portraits on these walls, they've seen it all, but the one I was about to paint would change everything. And by the time I laid down the final brushstroke, someone in this family would lose everything they thought they had. Now, shall I tell you how it happened? The invitations went out by phone, not formal, of course. God forbid anyone in this family respond to a handwritten letter anymore. David called. Julia followed up with a group chat. Aiden responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Lily sent a heart. I could already tell who would sit willingly and who would squirm. They arrived on a Sunday. The air was thick with August heat, and the garden had started to curl at the edges from lack of rain. I didn't water it. I wanted it wild, honest. Julia came first, wearing a white linen dress that said, I'm effortless, and makeup that said otherwise. She took one step into the foyer, looked around, and said, "Smells like oil paint and something old." "It's called history," I said. "And tea. Would you like some?" She didn't answer. Aiden stumbled in behind her, eyes glued to his phone, earbuds in. He muttered, "Hey," without looking up, and flopped onto the couch like it had been built for him. I watched him scroll for 10 minutes before I even heard his voice again. He was telling someone on a voice chat that he had to sit for some ancient painting thing this week, but would be back online soon. David followed last. He looked tired. That permanent kind of tired that settles into a man who spent too long keeping peace in a war he secretly helped start. "Where's Lily?" I asked. He smiled. "She's taking the train. Said she wanted to walk from the station. She likes the garden." That made me smile too. Lily was the only one who ever asked about the paintings. She'd sneak into my studio when she was younger and run her fingers just above the canvas, like she thought she might fall into the scene if she got too close. Now they were all here, more or less. The sittings began that afternoon. I told them it had to be one at a time. No spectators. I wanted their true faces, not the ones they put on for each other. Julia went first, reluctantly. She sat stiffly in the high-backed chair I'd pulled from the attic, knees crossed, arms folded like I was about to interrogate her. She stared at the corner of the room, not at me. "I don't understand why this is necessary," she muttered. "You don't need to," I said, mixing a deep burnt sienna. "Just sit still." "Do you even remember how to paint properly?" I dipped the brush and began. She didn't see the small curl of my lip as I watched her posture, her lines, the tightness around her jaw. Every inch of her was a performance. But my canvas didn't lie. It never did. When I finished the session, she didn't even ask to see it. Next was David. He was quieter, sat more naturally. He glanced at the unfinished portrait of Julia, then looked at me like he wanted to say something. "What's really going on, Mother?" he asked, voice low. I wiped the edge of my brush and looked at him. "You remember the summer we painted the shed?" I asked. He blinked. "The one Harold turned into the studio?" You were 10. You said you wanted to be a magician." He chuckled softly. "I forgot about that. You said you wanted to make people disappear." The silence after that was long. He looked down at his hands. "You're not well, are you?" he asked suddenly. "I mean, this portrait thing. It feels like something else." I met his eyes. "You're not entirely wrong." He looked afraid then. Good. Lily arrived that evening. She came in with paint on her fingertips and a sketch pad in her tote. When I opened the door, she hugged me without hesitation, without performance. Her smile didn't have edges. "I missed this house," she said. I let her sit in the garden with me, and she told me she'd applied to an art program. "But Mom and Dad think it's a waste. They want me to do something stable, you know." "I do know," I said. "They said the same to me once." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever regret not doing something else?" I thought of the portraits on the walls, the stories I'd captured, the secrets each one held. "No," I said, "never." Her session was short. She didn't need direction. She simply looked at me, calm and open as I painted. I could have finished her in one sitting. Aiden was last. He made a show of being inconvenienced, headphones still dangling from one ear, twitching every few minutes like the absence of his screen was causing withdrawal. He sat back lazily, pretending to be amused by it all. "You know this isn't how people do portraits anymore," he said. "You could have just used an AI app." "And yet here you are," I said, not looking up. He smirked. "Guess we all have our price." He wouldn't know it yet, but those words would haunt him soon enough. By the end of the week, the canvas was nearly complete. I worked at night when they'd all gone to bed or vanished behind their devices. I painted details they didn't know I'd seen. Julia's clenched hands, David's uncertainty, Aiden's smirk that never reached his eyes. And Lily. Soft, luminous Lily. She was the only one who looked at me without expectation. The only one who truly sat. And with every stroke of that brush, I brought Harold's plan to life. The family thought they were being painted for sentiment. They were being painted for judgment. And the canvas was nearly ready. By the fourth sitting, they started asking questions. Not out loud, of course. That would mean admitting something felt off. But I saw it in their eyes. The sidelong glances. The way David lingered by the studio door a little longer each morning. How Julia looked at the covered canvas like it might leap up and bite her. Aiden stopped joking altogether, and that silence was far louder. I never left the studio unattended, not even for a moment. I kept the portrait veiled, hidden behind a drop cloth thick enough to smother secrets. At night, I locked the door, not because I thought they'd steal it, because I knew they'd try to destroy it. Harold had warned me about this, before he died, before he added that codicil to the will. He said, "They love the money more than they love the legacy, Margaret. So if they try to bury you while you're still breathing, give them something they can't swallow." At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. I didn't anymore. On Wednesday morning, I found Julia alone in the hallway outside the studio. Her hand was on the doorknob. When she saw me, she jumped back like I'd caught her peering through someone's diary. "I was just wondering if you needed anything," she said. "Only privacy," I replied. She gave a thin smile. "You know, Margaret, I've been thinking. After this is all over, maybe we could look into assisted living together. You'd be surprised how lovely some of those places are." "Are they more lovely than stealing someone's home while they're alive?" That shut her up. I didn't need a reply. I'd already painted her one. That afternoon, David pulled me aside. "I don't like how tense things are getting," he said. "You mean now that people can't control me?" He sighed. "This portrait, whatever it is, it's stirring things up." "Good," I said. "Stirring prevents things from rotting." He frowned. "Are you trying to provoke us?" I stared at him. "I'm trying to remember you." And that's when I saw it. Just a flicker. But there it was. Shame. Not much. Not enough to undo the years. But a crack in the wall. And cracks let the light in. That night, Lily knocked on my door. She looked pale. She held something behind her back. I found this in Dad's briefcase," she said, holding out a thick stack of legal documents. "Power of attorney forms, signed, but not by you." I took the papers with shaking hands. I flipped through them. Forged. My signature, copied from old birthday cards. Harold's name used like a bargaining chip. They were planning to take everything. Before I could react, Lily said, "I thought maybe you knew. That's why you were doing all this." I nodded slowly. Harold knew. He tried to protect me in the only way he could. "You mean the codicil?" she whispered. Ah, so she had read the will. I looked at her closely. "Do you understand what it means?" She nodded. "If someone humiliates you publicly, they lose everything. And if I enforce it, they'll turn on you." I placed the papers gently on the desk. "They already have." The next day was the final sitting. All of them were there, lined up, postured, waiting like suspects in a lineup. I pulled the cloth from the canvas. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Julia gasped. It wasn't the kind of portrait she'd expected. Not a flattering family heirloom, not a polished painting of smiles and staged warmth. It was honest. Too honest. David's expression was uncertain. Julia's face was turned slightly away, jaw clenched, eyes cold. Aiden slouched with a sneer. And Lily shone like a soft light in a room full of fog. "Is this a joke?" Julia said, stepping closer. "You made me look furious." "You were." "This isn't a tribute," Aiden snapped. "It's a trap." I let their protests rise. let the temperature spike in the room. Then I said, "It's already done." They turned to me. "Harold knew what you were capable of," I said. "So he left you one last test." He added a clause. "If any of you ever humiliate me, especially in public, you lose everything." Julia turned pale. "You're lying." "I'm not." I walked to the safe and pulled out the notarized letter. Harold's signature, the clause spelled out clearly. The executor's stamp fresh and final. Lily read it aloud, her voice steady. There was silence. Then David broke it. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked weakly. "Because I was waiting," I said. "Waiting to see who you really were when you thought I was powerless." They stood there, stunned. No more protests, just the sound of crumbling illusions. I looked at Lily. "You're the only one who didn't fail the test." Then I turned to the rest. "This portrait. It will hang in the town museum, with Harold's original, side by side. A story in oil. Let the world see what legacy truly looks like." They didn't speak again that night. Not to me, not to each other. They packed quickly, left quietly. All but Lily. And as I stood in the studio the next morning, sunlight spilling across the brush-streaked floor, I realized something. This house was no longer full of ghosts. Just faces. Honest ones. It's quiet now. Not the cold kind of quiet, the kind you feel when you've been abandoned, but the kind that feels earned. Like silence after a storm, when the wind has dropped and the trees are still standing, even if they're changed. Lily stayed a few more days after the others left. We didn't talk about the portrait. We didn't talk about the claws. We just existed. She made tea in the morning. I painted in the afternoons. She'd sit in the garden with a book or a sketch pad, and sometimes we'd talk about color or light or where she wanted to live next year. Sometimes healing doesn't need a speech, just a room where you're allowed to breathe. I received a letter the next week from the family attorney, Harold's old friend, Mr. Pritchard. He'd spoken with Julia and David. They weren't contesting the will, not anymore. The clause was ironclad. Their lawyer told them as much. If anything, their silence was proof of guilt. You don't fight something you know is true. Aiden sent me a message. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I don't believe in burning bridges. But I do believe some bridges belong to someone else now. If he wants to rebuild, he'll have to do it without gasoline on his hands. The portrait was hung in the local museum that month, right beside the first one Harold ever painted of me. It was small, soft, a younger version of myself staring slightly off frame, as if I already knew what was coming. The museum curator called the new piece Legacy in Layers. I never told her what I really called it, in my heart. Truth in oil. People came to see it. Some of them recognized faces. Others saw strangers. But nearly everyone stood a little longer than they meant to. That's what truth does. It doesn't scream, it lingers. One afternoon, a young girl stood before it, staring. She turned to me, didn't recognize me, and asked, "Is this a real family?" I smiled. As real as they get. And I left it at that. Lily moved in officially in September. She keeps the upstairs room now. She got into the art program she wanted. I told her not to worry about money. Harold left her enough. But more importantly, I gave her the studio. "My gift to you," I said. She hugged me tight and whispered, "You gave me more than that." Some nights I still hear Harold's voice. Not like a ghost, nothing so tragic. Just a thought, a rhythm, the echo of a man who understood that protecting someone doesn't always mean shielding them. Sometimes it means giving them a sword. He gave me mine in a canvas. I painted them all. I told the truth. And in the end, I kept the only part of my family worth saving. So, if you're still listening, and you ever find yourself wondering whether you're being loved or simply used, look around. Ask yourself who would still sit with you if there were no inheritance. Ask yourself who you'd paint. and who you'd leave out. Thank you for listening. Margaret.